The letter looked boring. Processing your change of address. I hadn't moved, so I took a photo. That night, my lock app pinged. Guest code used, 12:06 a.m. Doorbell cam, hood up, quick steps, a wrist with a small black arrow. I opened my bank app to calm down. Savings, $0.04. Operating, $26.13. Money market, $0.00. 11 transfers, same size between 11:18 p.m. and 3:41 a.m. Same destination, hidden under a cute nickname. The bank said local IP and an address change 3 days ago. Only one person ever had my guest code, cousin. Only one person wore that arrow tattoo, brother-in-law. I called. He laughed. He said, "Relax, it's a family loan. I'll put it back Monday." I call fraud instead. They looped in Detective Bolton. He said, "Save everything. You're not overreacting." Warrant, garage, phone. In the freezer, under peas, an envelope with my name. On his desk, my checkbook, prepaid cards, my account nicknames, and my guest code on a sticky note. The marketing firm where the money landed, its EIN traced to brother-in-law. A judge froze the account, reversals started crawling back. This isn't about numbers, it's about boundaries and how fast you act when someone calls theft as family. I'm Rachel. I run a small shop in Madison, just off Williamson. I sell second chances for furniture and clothes that deserve one. A walnut dresser that follows the light across the room like it's remembering a different house. A leather jacket that makes a woman stand a little taller in the mirror because some edges look good on us. I did not get here because money grows on trees or because a man in a pressed shirt taught me about leverage. I got here because I can look at a stained armchair and see a parade of hands that will want it after it's cleaned, because I can buy a box of vintage costume jewelry for $40 and price it one piece at a time with love and profit. Because early mornings at estate sales and late nights steaming out someone else's cigarette years and showing up when I don't feel like showing up, that's what builds a life. The next step was the corner unit, the one with the brick archway under the faded paint, the corner that catches the golden hour like a reward. I had been walking past it for years, imagining a coffee station in the alcove and a rack of wool coats you have to run your hands over as you pass. When the lease sign went up on the inside, my heart kicked like boots when he hears the treat jar. I saved $134,800 to make that leap. Every extra drop from the year after the pandemic loosened its fist, every careful holiday season, every summer where I chose to patch the jeans instead of buy the new ones. I protected that money like you wrap a crystal bowl in layers of newspaper and bubble wrap and prayer. And then came the week where family and money tried to shake hands and left me with a bruise I'm still tracing. It started with potato salad, Jell-O with canned fruit, a ham someone bragged about for 30 minutes because he'd used a new glaze. It started with a church fellowship hall in late September that smelled like coffee and Lysol, with paper streamers and a banner that read, "Happy 90 June." Because my grandmother June, who taught me how to hem jeans and how to let the first pancake be ugly, was turning 90 and still sharp enough to correct a pastor. It started with all of us doing what Wisconsin families do at a milestone: hugging too hard, arguing softly about the Packers, gossiping kindly, laughing in a way that made it feel like nothing bad could slip through the doors without someone handing it a napkin and making it behave. I was refilling styrofoam cups when Lucy walked in, late and flushed, her hair pulled back in a ponytail she used to wear in high school when we'd drive to Devil's Lake and pretend we were older. She was my cousin, but felt like a sister until life pulled us into different rooms. She had on a nice blouse that didn't look like her, and she kept pulling the hem down like it was a costume. Her husband, Trevor, followed 2 beats behind, the way you follow your own echo. He has that shine on him that some men cultivate like a crop, the watch that wants you to see it, the shirt that won't wrinkle on principle, the grin that holds eye contact 2 seconds too long because you're supposed to understand that he's important. He sells something. The product changes every conversation. Houses, ideas, risk, the future. He says the word asset like it's a charm, like he's flinging it at any problem and it will lie down. He hugged Grandma gently, talked loudly about closing a deal in Sun Prairie, teased me the way he always does, the way he thinks is affectionate but lives closer to a pinch. "How's the little shop, Rachel? That cash cow still mooing for you?" He laughed before I answered, which is either confidence or fear in disguise. He moved through the room like a commercial. Lucy smiled like you smile when your face remembers it's supposed to. I made a run home around 2 to grab the old photo album with Grandma in her waitress uniform at the diner on East Wash, the one with the coffee cups the size of your hope in a pie case that hums. When I got to my porch, there was a USPS mailer half wedged in the box. It was the kind of thing you barely notice until you do. Processing your change of address. The letters were polite. My brain did a quiet stutter. I didn't change my address. I took a picture because I take pictures of anything that smells like it might become a problem later. I tucked the mailer into my tote, told myself it was a glitch, grabbed the album, and went back to the fellowship hall where babies were sleeping in strollers and uncles were explaining fantasy football like it was physics. Trevor cornered me during coffee and told me about putting money to work the way you tell a woman how to parallel park. He said if I was parking 6 figures in savings, I was stealing from myself. He said hard money lenders were getting 12% in 90 days on a flip in a cul-de-sac so perfect you could drop a postcard on it and it would find its way into Pinterest. He said the words family capital with a smile that included me without asking. He told me how bored my money must be. I told him bored money has a job. It buys drywall and a better HVAC for January and health care for 2 women who worked part-time and needed to go full. I told him bored money builds the corner. I said it without apology. Because at 41, I have learned to enjoy the way my voice sounds when it isn't trying to be small. He smirked like it was cute. He calls things cute when he wants them to back down. Lucy laughed, but her eyes didn't. Her eyes kept checking his mouth like weather. I got home around 9, fed Boots, peeled off my boots, washed my hands like a ritual, opened my laptop to find the contractor's email with the updated bid. I wasn't even going to click the bank tab. I wanted to live in the hope at least until morning. But I checked because I always check. It is the ceremony that tells me I'm being careful. Business savings, $0.04. Operating, $26.13. Money market, 0.00. The zeros were polite, almost comforting in their uniformity. They were not a warning, they were a verdict. The transfers were listed in neat lines, like someone had set a table for disaster. 11:18 p.m. to 3:41 a.m., like a metronome. Same amount, broken into appetizing chunks. Same destination, masked with asterisks and the kind of generic nickname you pick when you think rules are for other people. I didn't move for a full minute. I think my brain tried to send an error report and it got lost. I called the bank. The after-hours fraud department always makes me feel like someone's going to give me a warm blanket and a cup of tea while they quietly sew my life back together. The woman on the line was competent in a way that steadied me. She confirmed the transfers. She said, local IP. She said, address changed 3 days ago. She said, they could escalate. She asked if I had any reason to believe someone had access to my devices or my home. I clicked open my smart lock app because the question made my skin go alert, and there it was, like a little bell in the log, guest code used at 12:06 a.m. I have one guest code, and it sits like a forgotten key on my phone because I never give it out, except once to Lucy last year when she dropped off a casserole after I had the flu and I fell asleep before I could unlock the door. She said she deleted it after. People say they'll delete things the way they say they'll drink more water. My doorbell cam showed a person moving quick, head down, hood up. The video was what it always is, grainy and a second too late. But when the sleeve slipped back, there was a small black arrow tattoo on her wrist. Not artful, just a mark. I'd seen it earlier that afternoon when Trevor was talking with his hands, when he pushed his sleeve up to show Grandma the face of the fancy watch like it was a baby. I called Lucy. She answered quick and breathless, like she'd been waiting for something, and this was it. I asked if she or Trevor used my guest code last night. There was a pause that told me the answer before she did. Ratch, she said, and it wasn't an answer. He said it was a bridge. He said you'd understand. He told you were leaving money on the table. He told he'd put it back Monday. Lucy, I said, and my voice did something I don't like when it does. It went flat and low and calm like a lake that pretends to be safe. He stole from me. It's family, she said, like the word was a barrier we could lean against and it would hold. He said, I asked where he is. Middleton, she whispered, and then the address came out of her like a confession. I sent the lock log screenshot and the doorbell video to the bank. The fraud rep put me on a brief hold that was not brief at all inside my body. And then she came back with another person on the line, the security officer, who told me they had alerted Madison PD's Financial Crimes Unit. 10 minutes felt like it lasted an hour and an instant. The phone rang with a new voice, Detective Erin Bolton. She said my name like she'd already decided to care. She asked for permission to come over. I said yes so fast I scared Boots. She told me to gather anything that looked like a breadcrumb. I stood in my kitchen and looked around at my life and tried to see it the way a stranger would. My laptop on the table with a smear of flour from rolling out pie crust last week with Grandma. The bowl by the door where I, like an idiot, like a human, drop my keys when I walk in because the ritual is older than fear. Mail in a stack, one envelope slit open with my thumb and the paper inside clean. A broom leaning because I got distracted halfway through sweeping and walked away. Detective Bolton arrived with 2 uniformed officers who stayed politely on the porch while she came in. She had a face that said she'd seen every flavor of dumb crime and smart crime and crime that calls itself love, and she wasn't going to get tired before I did. She asked permission before she touched anything, took pictures of the screen, the logs, the mailer, the bowl by the door. She asked about my relationship with my cousin. She asked how a man like Trevor makes himself look like a solution to people who don't have a problem that needs his kind of fix. She explained things in terms I could hold. If a destination account was at a cooperative institution and transfers were still in the settlement pipe, you could sometimes stop money mid-river. She said sometimes, like other people say maybe, but her eyes looked more like probably. She asked for the videos, and I airdropped them and then emailed them and then held out my phone like a desperate person, and she smiled at me because she knew that feeling. She told me not to go to the poker room. She told me not to call him. She told me not to get in my car and drive somewhere with my heart hanging out. She told me her team would move. She told me the words I needed to hear more than I knew I did. You are not overreacting. It is a strange thing to make tea while there is a detective in your living room and 2 officers on your porch and your cat acting like the hero of the story on the back of the couch. The kettle hissed like it always does. My hand shook and stilled and shook again. I sat on my own stool at my own island and looked at my own hands and tried to inventory the ways I had invited this, and Detective Bolton cut off the thought like she could see it form. You didn't invite it, she said. He took it. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed and watched the light change on the ceiling, from street lamp to moon to a slow, pale gray that makes you feel like a person again. I thought about Lucy at 20, with eyeliner too thick and laughter that made everyone in the room laugh even if they didn't hear the joke. I thought about the way she had become careful around the edges since she married Trevor, how her voice always came in a half-second late in conversation, waiting for permission her brain had learned to seek. I thought about Grandma June, who lost 2 babies and 2 husbands and still says the first pancake is ugly and that is how it is and it doesn't mean the rest are ruined. I thought about how many women I know could tell you the last 4 digits of a man's credit card from memory because the card was a leash. By morning, Detective Bolton called with words that made my chest expand. The bank security team had frozen a destination account with a name that sounded like a marketing firm, but the EIN traced to Trevor. A judge signed a warrant for his garage and his phone. They were going, and I was to stay home and wait and maybe try to breathe like it was my job. They came back 2 hours later like a storm that had finished the worst of itself. Detective Bolton stood in my living room again with a Ziploc bag of sticky notes and a face that told me we were moving toward daylight. They had found my checkbook with pages missing, 2 prepaid debit cards, a printed list of my account nicknames, my guest code on a yellow square, in the freezer, under a bag of frozen peas, an envelope with my name on it. The level of insult is sometimes practical. They found Trevor in a strip mall poker room off University, acting like the hero in a movie that never got made. The uniformed officer who went along later told me he had tried to stick his words to the air like duct tape. Misunderstanding, family, Monday. He had called Detective Bolton sweetheart, and she had let the silence after the words sit long enough to teach him something. He had laughed the way men laugh when they're trying to make a woman feel silly, and then he had stopped laughing because handcuffs are not funny. When I went to the precinct, everything smelled like disinfectant and something underneath it that you can't scrub. Detective Bolton walked me through what would happen next. The bank security team had begun reversals. The first wires were already crawling back through the pipe because timing is everything in banking, the way it is in fiction. 12,000 here, 18,000 there, 25,000 in a neat block, another 121,000 by Tuesday, another 9,800 frozen, pending a hearing. Fraud protection might cover the rest. She told me to keep the compassion for myself I was already distributing to everyone else. She told me the story was going to end with me holding keys if I kept letting people help. Lucy came to my shop that afternoon with a canvas tote and no makeup and a softness around her mouth I hadn't seen since she was 22, and we used to get nachos after work and share a Coke because we were saving. She sat on a velvet sofa that still had a consignment tag tied with twine, and she cried like she was finally in a room where crying didn't cost extra. She told me about rules with a little r, the kind that slide into a life so slow you mistake them for love. She told me about asking for the card to buy groceries and the inventory of questions that came with it. She told me about how she started apologizing to waiters for choosing pasta because he wanted her to order the salad, how she laughed less loudly and then stopped, how she checked his face before she let herself finish a thought. She told him he'd convinced her that money was a team sport where he set the plays. She kept thinking if I swallowed my needs just a little further back, I'd be easy. He'd be kind. I said, you were never hard. He was never kind. She nodded like I'd given her permission to write it down in her head. She told me she'd filed for a protective order that morning with the help of an advocate who kept a box of tissues on her desk with a floral pattern that made crying feel less like a failure. She told me fear feels like a job when you're doing it right. The arraignment was Friday. I wore a blazer I saved for appraisals because it makes me feel like a woman who will not be interrupted. The courtroom looked the way it always does on TV and nothing like it does in your body. There were pews and wood and a flag and a judge who had to face up a person who drinks their coffee black and hot. Trevor stood at a table and tried to lean on the microphone like he was about to sell everyone a condo in Florida. The charges came dressed in words that felt both formal and not enough. Theft by false representation, identity theft, unauthorized use of a computer. His lawyer said first offense like he thought that made the harm cute. The judge looked at my stack of proof the way a mother looks at a broken vase when the kid says it broke itself. Bail, restrictions, no contact, surrender passport, a list of things that said the world remembered how to protect me. On the sidewalk after, the sky was aggressively bright in a way that made you squint at the ordinary. A woman in scrubs balanced a latte in a phone call that sounded like gratitude. A teenager in a hoodie told a joke that made his friend bend in half. A food truck across the street had tomato soup and grilled cheese, and I bought both and ate it sitting on a step because sometimes being held by bread and melted cheddar is how your mammal brain believes you again. I started saying things out loud in my shop that week. I said, we are going to open in the corner unit in 6 weeks because a promise made out loud and earshot of other people has to get its shoes on. My contractor came by with a tape measure and a pencil behind his ear and a paper cup of nails he refuses to put in a pocket because he believes in small talismans. He walked me through line items and I walked him through the colors of the paint, and we stood in the archway while the sun did the thing it does that made me think of the day in 9th grade when a boy pressed a note into my hand and I learned I liked hope better than surprise. I poured energy into work because it is the one machine that always returns heat when I turn it. I posted about the theft on the shop Instagram because I wanted to warn without fear and because I knew some woman out there was telling herself her guest code was fine and her mailbox was fine and her boyfriend's laugh was fine. And I wanted her to hear my voice in the mess. People showed up the way people do if you let them. An old man who fixes antique clocks for fun asked me if I had any broken wall clocks in the back, then took 3 home and returned them ticking. A middle school art teacher brought her students on a field trip and bought a stack of mismatched teacups because she wanted to teach them about beauty that isn't uniform. A woman with hands like hard work dropped off 2 garbage bags of winter coats for our community rack, and I pretended my eyes were leaking because of the dust. Lucy came by with Grandma and a pan of bars only grandmas know how to make, the kind you cut into squares and pretend you'll only eat one. Grandma sat in a folding chair and pointed with her cane and told us all how to do it better, and we loved her for it. She told Lucy to wear the red lipstick again because the world had gotten used to her mouth being quiet and she was done with that. She told me to move the mirror 2 inches to the left because she couldn't see her whole self, and you cannot build a life where women don't see all of themselves. I changed everything about my security, but kept my front door painted the same shade I've always loved because fear doesn't get to decorate my house. I moved the spare key from the bowl where my mother's voice told me not to keep it. I bought a locking mailbox with a slot that makes letter carriers swear under their breath because it sticks. I brought them cookies because I am not trying to start a war with the USPS. I turned on features in my banking I used to ignore because convenience had always whispered in my ear. I made a little card that sits by my register now that says, "We protect what we build," in a font I picked like picking earrings that make your neck look elegant. Trevor took a plea because his lawyer did the math on how many receipts Detective Bolton and I had pinned to the board. He said words in a courtroom that will follow him around like a smell. Men like him learn in a hard way that their voices stop working on some doors. He will be away long enough to miss things the world doesn't prompt you to count until they're gone. Birthdays, ordinary Tuesdays, a double rainbow over East Wash that 2 little kids will scream about. He will be away long enough for Lucy to learn where she ends and quiet begins. Lucy moved into a small 1-bedroom with a view of a parking lot and a maple that tries its best. On Saturdays, she buys flowers from the farmer's market and puts them in a juice jar because a vase is a thing you get after you remember that vases are not indulgent. She laughs all the way to the end of a laugh sometimes, and sometimes she stops with her mouth open like she remembers she ought to check, and then she finishes the laugh anyway because we practice. She picked up a part-time job at UW Health and Scheduling, and she likes it because it makes her feel useful and because people say thank you more than you'd expect on a phone call. She learned that you can buy a coffee maker without asking permission, and that the first cup you make tastes like a parade. She started therapy with a woman who doesn't make eye contact too hard and gives homework that looks like sitting in a park without your phone for 20 minutes. I learned that I don't have to be a hero to myself every day. I can be a person who sits on the couch and lets Boots take up more than his share of space. I can be a person who answers DMs from strangers who say, "My boyfriend has my passwords," and I can say, "Change them now," and I can send a list of resources without apologizing for sounding bossy. I can be a person who goes to bed at 9 and wakes up at 6 and makes oatmeal and doesn't check the door 3 times because the lock app lets me see the bolts, and that is the kind of magic that does not ask for blood. I learned that the number in the bank account is not actually the thing I was protecting all those years. It was the idea that I could want something and not have to apologize for wanting it. It was the idea that I could build a corner in a city and say to women like me, "Come in here and be as you are. And if a chair needs a second chance, so do you. And both of you can be gorgeous." Opening day arrived 6 weeks after the courthouse, on a Sunday, because I like the way a Sunday asks you to be gentle. We painted on a Saturday with the windows open, what I call a Wisconsin fall day that tricks you into thinking winter is polite. Walt brought Culver's custard that melted before we could finish our brushes and left little rings on the drop cloth, and none of us got mad. Walt measured something and muttered about studs, and I said I trusted him like I trust a bridge I've walked across 100 times. Grandma supervised from her folding chair with a glass of lemonade like she was judging a 4-H competition and we were trying to impress her. Lucy came in a sweatshirt with paint on the sleeve and red lipstick, and she helped me tape the trim with blue tape, and I showed her how to pull it off while the paint was still tacky. We wrote our names in pencil on the inside of the back of a shelf where no one will see except us, and maybe someday a girl who buys it and flips it for herself. We cut a ribbon that I ordered off the internet, which felt silly until it didn't. Neighborhood people came in and said nice things that were specific, like all good compliments, about the way the light hits the shoe rack, about the smell of cedar blocks, about the mirror's angle. A woman spun once in a dress, and her friends clapped because that's what women do when we feel like ourselves in a thing. A man bought a chair for his daughter's first apartment and told me that he hadn't seen her this happy since she got her driver's license. A teenager asked if I hired on weekends, and I said apply, and she beamed in a way that made me miss being 17 for 5 seconds. I put a small frame on the counter with the words, "We protect what we build." People read it and nodded like they were saying amen in their heads. A woman touched the frame with 2 fingers. "My sister needs to see this," she said. "She keeps deleting herself to make room." At noon, my church coat drive guy showed up with a truck bed full of donations, and we set up a rack that said, "Take one if you're cold," and I don't think anybody slept sad that night with a cold neck. People pinned notes on the pockets like treasure. A pair of gloves tucked in, a Starbucks gift card with $8 left, a little slip of paper that just said, "You matter." I cried behind the counter once and blamed the paint fumes, and Grandma rolled her eyes like I always had flair, and she raised me that way. The first week, a woman came in with a bruise she was trying to cover with her hair, and I looked exactly where she wanted me to look, which was at the earrings. And I told her they made her eyes look like they were telling a joke. She bought them, and she stayed a little longer than earrings require. We do small things in the face of large things because sometimes we cannot start at the large thing without breaking. She came back 3 days later without the bruise. She had a pamphlet from a clinic in her purse and a list of numbers in her notes app, and I do not need to know the rest. I still wake up sometimes with my heart trying to sprint out of my chest because it is a mammal, and mammals do what they do. But when I check the lock app and see the bolts, and when I open the bank app and see the numbers look like a sturdy table again, I breathe in a way that tells my brain we made it through the first ending and we can keep walking. Lucy and I go to Grandma's apartment on Thursdays and make dinner with too much butter because we are our grandmother's grandchildren, and the first pancake is still ugly. We talk about nothing like it's a luxury. Sometimes Lucy tells me the rules she used to live by, and then we write new ones on sticky notes and put them on her fridge. Today's rule: no apologizing for smiling. Last week's: if you wouldn't talk to a friend like that, don't let yourself. We are building a bulletin board of boundaries, and it is beautiful. Boots sits under the table and pretends he is not waiting for chicken.
There is a kind of peace I didn't know I could feel that comes from knowing you can see it now. The red flags you used to translate into pink because you were taught red meant you were difficult. The way a joke lands on your skin. The way someone says cute and means small. The way your body gets still when you walk into a room and you aren't sure if you have to calculate. I carry a little notebook in my bag now, not just for inventory, but for moments where I catch myself practicing safety like a chore, and I write them down, and I draw a star, and I tell myself, this is love with a backbone. People ask me what I would say to a woman listening who feels the ground tilt under her but keeps pretending it's fine. I say this: it is not paranoid to lock the door. It is not rude to ask a bank to help you set guardrails. It is not dramatic to keep photos and timestamps and to trust the part of you that notices the mailer half stuffed in your box. It is not small to ask for a detective and mean it. It is not heart-hearted to draw a line across the word family and put your own name on your side. You are not crazy for protecting the thing you built. You are responsible. You are allowed. You are enough. Grandma June says family is who locks the door with you, not behind your back. She told me that last Sunday, sitting in the new shop with a to-go coffee and a slice of pie from the diner where she waited tables at 19. And I wrote it down and made a little print and put it on a shelf where people can buy it for $8 because wisdom should be affordable. People pick it up and turn it over, and sometimes they nod and sometimes they laugh like they've been waiting to hear it out loud. On a Wednesday after closing, a woman around my age came in out of breath just as I was flipping the sign and asked if she could just look for 2 minutes because she had had a day, and sometimes you need a thrift place to reset your soul. I let her wander. She held a teacup like a bird. She told me her husband and she were trying to make a baby, and so far it was just a lot of questions and waiting rooms and quiet. She said she was tired of being gentle with herself and needed to buy something that didn't require patience. She bought the teacup. We wrapped it in tissue like it was the start of something, and maybe it was. Not everything is a lesson with a bow. Sometimes it's just a woman holding a cup because it gives her hands a job. When I lock up at night now, I look at the mirror 2 inches to the left and I see all of me. I see the woman who sits on her floor with boots and eats a grilled cheese because grilled cheese is what healing tastes like some nights. I see the woman who can stand in a courtroom and not shake because the receipts are lined up like prayers and the judge sees the shape of a thing. I see the woman who checks the mail like a ritual and smiles because it's full of boring bills and coupons for oil changes, and there is no letter in there about a change of address she did not ask for. I see a woman who trusts herself to know the difference between bored money and ready money. I do not want to make a hero out of a bank or a detective or a judge, though I will send them cookies every holiday forever because they did their jobs, and that is no small thing. I want to make a hero out of the part of me that took a picture of the mailer, out of the part of me that called Lucy and said, "Where are you? Tell me the truth." Out of the part of me that stayed on the phone long enough to stumble into a woman named Bolton who said my name like a promise. Out of the part of me that told Trevor the story he was trying to star in is not mine. He called it a family loan. I called it theft. I will call it a warning for whoever needs it. I will call it the loudest thing I have learned in my 40s, that blood is not a hall pass to harm, that boundaries are not a wall against love. They are the shape that lets love live in your house and not burn it down. If you're listening right now and your gut has been talking to you in a voice you keep telling to hush, please let it speak. If the person who says they love you likes you best when you are small, please do not take that as a cue to shrink. If you have a guest code you forgot lives in someone else's phone, delete it now. If you keep your spare key in the bowl by the door like every Midwestern woman who has ever come home carrying too many bags, move it somewhere that costs 2 extra seconds to reach. If your mailbox wobbles on its post, fix it and add a lock. If someone laughs when you say you want to protect the thing you worked for, hear that laugh as a weather report and bring a coat. And when the world says you are too much or too careful or too alert, remind yourself that we protect what we build. Say it out loud while you paint a wall with your cousin and your grandmother points with a cane and your cat supervises like he invented sunlight. Say it while you hang the mirror and slide it to the left an inch and then 2 until it shows all of you. Say it when you take your keys out of your bag and turn the deadbolt and let your house exhale. Say it when you step into your shop and breathe the smell of cedar and thread and the good kind of dust. Say it when you sign a lease and when you cut a ribbon and when you write a pamphlet for other women telling them how to notice a mailer and a guest code and a tattoo. Say it on the days when you forget. Say it on the days when remembering feels like a victory and a chore. Say it quietly to the girl you were at 22 and loud to the man who calls you sweetheart while he is trying to take what is yours. Say it to Lucy when she puts a vase on her table without asking anyone's permission and fills it with sunflowers that make the whole room laugh. Say it to the judge who looks over his glasses at a man who thought Monday was a magic word. Say it to Detective Bolton when she says you did good and you believe her. Say it to Grandma June on her 91st when she puts on lipstick in the window and tells you your corner catches the light just right. We protect what we build.
And if you have been betrayed by someone who thought your love was a bank account, I see you. If you have had to cut out a toxic branch to save the tree, you are not cruel. If you are still gathering courage in little handfuls and you're not sure when you'll have enough, borrow some of mine. Use my story like a spare key tucked somewhere only you know. When you're ready, open the door. Step inside, lock it behind you, sit for a minute and breathe like this is your job. Then get up and do the next thing you can do. Change a password, call a bank, take a picture of a mailer, text a woman who will meet you in a parking lot and walk you into a building with resources and kindness. Buy a grilled cheese, tell your grandmother, put on red lipstick, write a sticky note that says you are allowed. My shop is open on the corner under the archway, and the afternoon light does the thing it does that makes everything look like a painting you wish you could live in. Boots has decided the sunny spot by the front table is his, and customers have learned to step around him like he pays rent. The mirror shows people their whole selves. The frame on the counter with the words, "We protect what we build," gets fingerprints on it because people touch it every day like it's a talisman. It is. This is not a story that ends with a dramatic speech under a thundercloud. It ends the way lives get good, in repetition, in locks clicked at night, in receipts kept neatly where you can find them, in boundaries enforced kindly and firmly, in soup and grilled cheese and church coat drives and a kid asking for a weekend job and the hum of a city that holds you up if you let it. I cannot hand you a checklist that fixes everything. I can hand you the shape of what it looked like for me. A mailer I didn't ignore, a guest code I treated like a crime scene, a detective who knew the rhythm of a woman trying to be brave and messy at the same time, a grandmother who told me what family is, a cousin who decided enough was a full sentence, a cat who sat on my chest when I couldn't catch my breath and forced me to stop fighting my own lungs. Trevor thought he could make a story where he was the main character and the world nodded along. He forgot I write my own. He forgot I have a city behind me and a grandmother beside me and a cousin relearning how to take up space and a cop with a pen sharper than his watch and a shop full of women who come in to try on the self they thought they lost and walk out carrying it in a bag with twine around the handle. He forgot that board money is not bored when a woman has a corner to build. He forgot that Monday doesn't undo Sunday. He forgot that calling a theft a loan only works when everyone in the room is pretending. We are done pretending. If you made it this far, thank you for holding the line with me. Tell me if the mailer story rang a bell in your gut. Tell me if you deleted a code or moved a key or made a phone call after listening. Tell me if you chose grilled cheese for dinner and felt better. Tell me if your grandmother has a pancake rule. Tell me if you are standing in front of a mirror that's 2 inches to the left and for the first time you can see all of you. I will be here under the archway counting donations for the coat rack, sending Lucy bad memes that make her snort in public, feeding Boots exactly 4 treats because 5 makes him a monster, writing a sign for the front that says holiday hours in marker that will smudge if I don't wait long enough, telling my story to any woman who needs to borrow it until she has the breath to tell her own. We protect what we build. We protect what we build. We protect what we build.